of a data hoarder. I live relatively simplistically in the rest of my life, but man, it is really, really hard for me to get rid of a photo or an email or a text or anything because, why? I've had data failures, right? I've lost things that were really, really important to me and I couldn't get them back somehow. And I live for data, I live for information. That is how I do what it is that I do. It's how it makes sense of the world. And when it fails, it freaks me out. We're looking at a future that is so dynamic and unknown. I was at an event recently with a Walmart executive who claimed that retail, let's just take one industry for example, will change more in the next 5 years than it has in the last 50. There's another futurist who will claim that society will change more in the next 50 years than it has in the last 300. Oh, sorry, in the next 20 years. Sorry, next 20 years more than it has in the last 300. That's a pretty extraordinary number. Let's say he's even off by 100 years. It's pretty extraordinary still that we will go through that rate of change. So as we start to imagine what that means for the world of work and how it is that we do what it is that we do, it becomes a very complex thing. We don't know how it's going to take shape. Try and orient from these two places. What does the future need and expect from us? As we look at all this data and we synthesize it, what picture does it paint? And then, what are we each in a unique position to create and contribute to that future? And that's as an individual, that's as an organization, and that's as an industry. We can scope it all different ways. And actually, scope becomes an important part of the future. As you take in this information, I invite you to do it through 3 lenses. The first is as a professional. We always come to these events because we want to be able to do our work better tomorrow, right? That's how we justify coming to beautiful Miami Beach. But you're also a human that is going through this. You're a parent, you're a son or a daughter, you are part of a community that is wrestling with many of these questions. It's hitting us personally, not just professionally. And increasingly, we're being asked to think about this as a member of society. This is not scoped just to our work, right, or just to our home lives. We're increasingly asked to think about this bigger, which makes the future that much more complex. Because it's not just about speed and about scale, it's also about scope. Imagine you're at the airport one day and you see a young pregnant mom traveling with a 2-year-old and no other help. And the 2-year-old's having one of those moments where they're running around the airport and they're just, having a wild moment. And the mother's doing everything she possibly can to calm down and control the situation, but she can't. And at some point, she just sits down and overwhelmed and starts weeping. And what happens next is extraordinary. 6 women that do not know each other step out of whatever line or seat they're in, and they quietly encircle the mom. One starts singing Itsy Bitsy Spider. One pulls out a toy. One pulls out a snack. One helps mom with a sippy cup. And the whole thing de-escalates, right? The son comes and sits on the mother's lap. They take a deep breath. And the mother and the son are able to get on the plane calmly, happily. And then what happens next? Nothing. The women just disband. They go back to where it was that they were sitting or standing prior. No one asked for permission. No one asked for a guidebook. No one formed a group. No one asked for a promotion. No one went on vacation together. No one started a Facebook group, right? The only thing we know about is that someone was touched by the experience and did put it on social media. But to me, it's an extraordinary case of just showing up, seeing something, taking agency, trusting that you've got something to bring to it, organically coordinating, and then moving on, right? There's another opportunity. So I will make a case that these 2 things together, right, being both really audacious, bold, and rule, challenging, if not breaking, and humanistic and compassionate and organic are the keys to the future. Why? The reality is technology is changing, information is growing, and culture is shifting, not just faster and faster, my friends, but exponentially. So this is really a desire to help share the 4 big shifts and the mindsets that go with them. Because it's not just about understanding the shift, it calls to a different kind of leadership or leadering or posture or approach. The first is a disruption mandate. This is nothing new to any of us about the fact that, before 2007, this did not exist, which means before 2007, this did not exist, right? We'd give up a finger. There's another study that talks about our limb. I actually thought, prostheses are kind of pretty. Whole conversation about, we'd lose our wallet before we lose our phone. These have become really important to us, not because the hardware is so gorgeous, right? It's ridiculous to carry this thing around all the time, be so attached to it. But this is why. It opened up an entire world of being able to do things that we could not do before. Completely democratized retail. All right, which leads us to this permanent state of ambiguity. There are so many things happening at once. We will never actually know for sure that we're making the right decision anymore, right? There is not even a beginning and a middle and end to any transaction. They're all constant. So how do we navigate in a world that is changing this quickly and has this much going on? How do we know when it is the time to act? If you're in the military, you train with a really different mindset. You invite people to think about it in a VUCA world, right? How do we operate when it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous? There, again, is no rule book. There is no chain of command. There is no hierarchy that will prepare you for every situation when you're in the military. We have to prepare soldiers to be able to act dynamically, like the women at the airport. What happens here in business is that we often stop making decisions, right? We want to know that the killer app is here, or now is the right time, or it's really been proven, or that somehow it's been validated or verified. But often when that happens, it potentially could be too late. Now, there's this whole interesting conversation about the cloud. I was privileged enough to be on a panel a few years ago with, I think it was the head of cloud computing, Bob Kelly from Microsoft. We were on the campus, and he was going on and on about the digital cloud, how it's going to enable so much of this future that we're excited about in terms of predictive analytics and big data and AI, and solve big, huge world problems, and was so excited. And I just thought to myself, and then said out loud to these 450 analysts, what is the equivalent of the human cloud? What allows us to level up in that same way? And are social technologies keeping up with digital technologies? So here's the deal. It's all connected, right? There isn't something that is not connected to something else. We can talk about externalities. We can talk about a lot of different things. I will say our mood around these technologies and what it is that we can do with them is greatly informed, again, by how the stories that we tell, whether or not we are optimistic or not optimistic, and how we feel about this. I cannot implore enough, for me, the importance of a positive narrative. If you have a teenager in your life, that teenager needs to know that the future is abundant, that future is great, that future is thriving, and that they have a place in it. Because so much of the storytelling right now, when we start talking about the future and about, again, data and about AI and about all that stuff, can be really scary. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't take it seriously. We absolutely should. But wow, there's a million great things that are going to happen in this future.